Hello, Nicole. This is Prof. Dodik, our Vice Rector.
Hello, Professor Dodik. Thank you for joining.
Hello. Hello. Good morning. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good morning for Europe time, and good afternoon for Indonesian time, and good evening for American time.
Okay, so yeah, I think participants are joining in. We can begin the opening remarks, I think, in next 2 minutes or so. Let us give participants a bit time to join in. You can message your colleagues if in case they have registered for this event. Thank you. Thank you. Let's hold the board.
So, Nicole, how do we know about the information? I mean, like number of participants or
so
who
presently
are...
the attendance is 16.
16.
Yeah, 16. So that's why I think eventually they're going to join the session because the registrations are around 110.
Okay. So this is the number of participants here already, including the participants. So it's not only
in the including the panelists, the number is 24, and the attendees out of it is 17.
Okay. Yeah. We hope that many people will come, but it is actually predictable because everybody is already on the way home to the hometown because this is the third year of our pandemic, and this is the year when the government opened the permission, so everybody will go home for sure.
Okay, so we can start with the opening remarks now, so that in the interest of time, please, Professor Dodik.
Okay, thank you very much. I'm so sorry, off cam because I am now in the Minangkabau International Airport in West Sumatra. Yeah, sorry. Okay, thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. I would like to welcome everyone to this webinar entitled Effective Use of Academic and Social Media Networks for Endorsing Publication, hosted by IPB University's Directorate of Scientific Publication and Scientific Information in partnership with Enago Akademik. IPB University has been collaborating with Enago for a few years. We have conducted several programs with Enago Academy, such as the workshop on academic writing and publishing a few years ago. And as I am sure many of you know that Enago has been supporting IPB in providing proofreading and copy editing services for our lecturers and students in the process of publishing their research papers in top scientific journals. IPB University has been consistent in being among the top 5 universities in Indonesia with the highest number of international publications. Despite the significant challenges during the COVID-19 pandemic, in 2021, IPB has succeeded in producing more than 1,700 publications in Scopus Index journal, which surpasses the number of our publications in the previous years. It is important to note, however, that we need to shift our focus to not only producing scientific papers and increasing the number of our publications, but also emphasizing the impact of our research articles on the global academic community. One of the ways to measure the impact is by measuring the citation numbers or how our work is referred to by other people in the advancement of our research field or science in general. Citations are increasingly used as performance indicators, and citations are taught to reflect the quality of the research and its impact. Up to now, IPB remains among the top 5 universities in the country with the most citations of Scopus Index publication. Importantly, we rank second in the number of citations per publication compared to other PTN-BH, or what we call is independent university. These numbers also become important for IPB as an indicator of the university's performance as we continue to aim for a higher rank in the global ranking of universities, such as QS Asia University Ranking and QS World University Ranking. There are various factors that determine how suitable our scientific papers are. Of course, the quality of our work and publishing our results in top journals is a major and obvious factor. In addition to that, other efforts can be made to increase the visibility of our works, and I do believe that we will hear a lot of more from our speaker, Professor Richard de Grijs, strategies relevant to the efforts of endorsing our work in various channels. We thank also to Professor Richard de Grijs for willing to serve as the speaker of our webinar. And we also thank Enago for its continuous support to IPB University. I do believe that faculty members and students of IPB University will think a lot today about the importance of utilizing academic networking platforms and social media platforms in endorsing our scientific paper. We hope that everyone can incorporate the information we will learn today in strengthening our efforts to endorse our research. Our research paper effectively disseminates the results and achieve a higher impact. IPB University through DPIS will continue to provide our best support in this effort. With that, I officially open this webinar and I wish everyone a pleasant webinar. Thank you very much. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Thank you, Professor Dodek, for your opening speech. I think Dr. Fitria, you can take over with the starting of the introduction, and then we can get started with the webinar.
All right. Okay, thank you, Nicole, and thank you, the Enago team, Enago Academy team, for coordinating this webinar today, hosted by IPB University, particularly the DPIS, or the Directorate of Scientific Publication and Strategic Information. Selamat siang, Bapak dan Ibu hadirin. Good afternoon, lecturers as well as students in IPB University. Thank you for joining this webinar, despite being already in the end of Ramadan and holiday season. Hopefully, everyone can gain a lot of knowledge through today's webinar. And please allow me to introduce myself first. My name is Fitria Nuranisa Dewi. I currently serve as a Deputy Director in DPIS, assisting Ibu Eva and her team in DPIS. And today we are delighted to have a webinar emphasizing on the effective use of academic and social media networks for endorsing publication. As we heard from Professor Dodek's remarks just now, is very important more than ever, I think, to increase not just the number of publication, but also the impact of our publication, and whether to get more citation or be referred by others, or to increase the visibility, to expand the network of our research. So hopefully we're going to learn how to do that today from our distinguished speaker, Professor Richard de Grijs. So I'm very delighted to lead this main session of today's webinar, and I encourage the participants here today to if you have any questions or thoughts, or during Professor Richard's presentation, to just shoot questions in the chat box, whether in Bahasa Indonesia or in English, whichever is convenient for the participant. So without further ado, I would like to invite Dr. Richard to give presentation. But before that, I would like to read a summary of his very outstanding CV of our bio sketch. So Professor Richard de Grijs is an acclaimed academic and journal editor with more than 25 years of experience in physical sciences. And in March 2018, he joined Macquarie University in Australia as Associate Dean for Global Engagement. And Professor Richard has served as a scientific editor at Astrophysical Journal from 2006 to 2012, and Deputy Editor of the Astrophysical Journal Letters from 2012 to 2018. And he has received numerous awards, including 2012 Selby Awards from the Australian Academy of Science, and 2017 Erskine Award from the University of Canterbury in New Zealand. And Professor Richard was the founding director of the East Asian Office of Astronomy for Development, an institution under the auspices of the International Astronomical Union. And his current senior appointments include roles as senior advisor to the Australian government on Australia Awards in Indonesia, as a member of the advisory board of the Australia-China Consortium for Astrophysical Research, and as president of Division C on Education, Outreach, and Heritage of the International Astronomical Union, which I think that's just like a short snapshot of his outstanding CV. So I would like to welcome Dr. Richard, Professor Richard, virtually again in IPB University. So he's been to IPB before in the past, a few years ago. So I'm very delighted to have you here today again, Professor Richard. And without further ado, I welcome you to give your presentation. The screen, I guess, not the floor. The screen is all yours. Go ahead, Professor Richard.
Thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. I'll share my screen. There we go. Can someone confirm that you can see it?
Yes.
Yes, thank you. Right, so it's my pleasure to be here, even though it's virtual. Indeed, a couple of years ago, I spent a week with the Enago team in Indonesia, and we spent a day at IPB as well, which was nice and good for me to see what your campus looks like, etc. So that was a good experience. So when I was asked to lead this webinar today on the effective use of academic and social media networks, I was delighted to do so, provided that the time, of course, worked, which it did today. And so that's in essence what we're doing today. We're talking about the steps that should happen after you have had your paper accepted. Because academic work and science doesn't stop there. Once you've had your paper accepted, it's published in a journal, you don't want it to just die there. You want other academics, other people to pay attention to your work. And so it is important to actually advertise your work and well, gain more visibility for it. So that's what we're doing today. Now, it was mentioned already. If you have any questions, feel free to add it in either the Q&A session of the webinar or the chat box. At the end of the session, when I plan to answer your questions, you are also very welcome to raise your hand and ask the question in person if you like. So there's lots of opportunities for questions. We would prefer to answer your questions at the end of the webinar in order to have a smooth flow of information. Right, now, so here is today's agenda. We will go through 6 different aspects of using social media to promote your research. First, we'll talk about the importance of research promotion, followed by the importance of establishing a social media strategy. Don't just go about and do random things. Have a strategy and use your time more effectively. Then we'll talk about some popular academic networking platforms, popular social media platforms, and how the 2 types of platforms interact. Other digital strategies for promotion. And then finally, how do we know that what we've done on social media actually reached our audience? What is the impact? So that's the plan for today. Let's start with the first of those components, the importance of research promotion. Now, I'm starting here by showing you a graph which shows you the number of records, and the records are peer-reviewed papers and peer-reviewed conference publications published in a number of subsequent years between 2018 and 2020. And these are numbers from 2 different providers. One of them is called Scopus. You are probably very familiar with it because you need to publish in Scopus indexed journals in order to gain promotion in Indonesia, as far as I'm aware. The other is Dimensions. And so if you just look at those red and purple lines at the top of the diagram, you see that there has been a steady increase in publications, records, peer-reviewed articles and conference papers over those few years. In fact, the STM report of 2021 showed that the growth rate in articles published between 2015 and 2020 was somewhere between 5 and 6.5%. We're talking here about numbers of anywhere between 4.2 and 4.7 million documents that were tracked. So this is a sustained growth, and that goes well beyond the statistical uncertainties. However, only publishing is not enough. The promotion of research work and your career in the digital age by academics has become more crucial in today's digital age than ever before. And we've seen that, of course, during the past 2.5 years when the pandemic has been raging. So, first of all, let us consider why researchers should actually promote their work digitally on social media. And here are 6 aspects that you should keep in mind. First of all, by promoting your work on social media, it will gain increased visibility, which is always good. That might be to other stakeholders. These could be peers in academia. They could also be government officials. They could be non-profit employees. So you have a wider impact. Your research will gain a higher impact. And as a consequence, you hope to obtain more citations to your work, which is the currency in our field, unfortunately. That will hopefully come with an enhanced scholarly reputation. And in turn, that may allow you to build better collaborations domestically or internationally because people know your work and they might therefore be keen to collaborate with you. And in turn, of course, once you've established that network and your reputation, you will have access to better funding opportunities. So these are 6 good reasons why you should promote your research beyond simply publishing it in a journal and leaving it there for all eternity to sit. So you might then wonder, how can I go about promoting my research? Well, there are 2 different options there. We can use conventional methods and also novel emerging methods. Among the conventional methods, are presenting at conferences, issuing press releases, and of course, citing your own research. Now, you should not oversight your work because that is considered a bad habit, but do cite your own research where it's relevant. Trending methods, as it's called on the right-hand side, or emerging methods perhaps, involve building good collaborations, practicing open science, using academic as well as social media networks and other digital strategies. We will discuss both academic and social media networking platforms in detail during today's presentation. So that's why we should do it. Now, I mentioned briefly that in order to do this effectively and use your time most effectively and efficiently, you should really consider establishing a social media strategy. Using social media platforms such as LinkedIn, Orchid, ResearchGate, Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, Mendeley are great tools for drawing attention to your work and interacting with the research community. This also helps you access up-to-date information in your field. However, it needs time and effort by researchers to build and maintain an effective network. Amongst the various number of social media networking platforms available at the moment, researchers need to select the right channel depending on your research field, your experience, and the time available to you to actually do this, because we have many competing interests in terms of the use of our time. It is also important to continuously update and improve your profiles to maintain your network. Don't just set up a profile and leave it there, because things are changing, and so are your achievements, of course. So here are the various steps that you could consider. First, create and maintain an online profile. Once you've done that, engage in various scholarly communications networks, build a social networking profile, and finally monitor progress and measure success. And we'll discuss all of these aspects in today's webinar. So this is how to use your digital media. Then you might wonder, why do I need to establish a social media strategy? And again, I have a number of aspects I would like you to consider here. First of all, for some reason that's not working, choose the right, you needed to choose the right social media platforms and tools. It is not a good idea to just randomly establish profiles on all kinds of social media platforms without thinking about what they do and which subset of your audience you might reach. To stay focused, as it is clear that social media is time-consuming and distracting. It could be a real time sink, and you could spend all of your time on social media. A lot of our young people do that, of course, and that's not efficient. Helps to understand the pros and cons of social media usage for your research area. In some research fields, in some countries as well, of course, certain social media tools are used more often than others. For instance, in my field, people might use Twitter, but not Facebook so much, etc. You need a social media strategy to control and manage your digital footprint. It is actually very important to keep track of where you appear on the internet and what is being said about you, to manage that digital footprint and remedy anything that might be incorrect or even damaging to your profile in your career. The social media strategy provides easy ways to reach your target audience and your peers, but of course, for that, you first need to know what your target audience is, and it is actually well worth spending a little bit of time considering who you really want to use. Is it policymakers? Is it other researchers? Is it nonprofits? Is it youth? Is it the general public? So there are all different types of stakeholders, and it is well worth considering how you want to reach each of them, if you want to reach each of them, and which ones will be prioritized. Also, social media strategies will create a higher impact for your research and therefore add to your professional reputation. All right, so hopefully now that I have convinced you that it's useful to have a strategy, how to get started? Well, to get started, to avoid potentially wasting your time with unfocused use of social media, decide on a detailed strategy. And in essence, what you should do is think of the 5 W's. who, where, what, when, and how. How is not a W, but it ends with a W, right? So who, again, who is your target audience? And also who will actually do the social media networking? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be a junior scholar, a PhD student, or a postdoc in your lab? And who will be accountable for anything that's being put online? How to make your posts more accessible, not just for your peers, but perhaps for the wider scientific community or the general public. How do you do that without using jargon too much? And so that leads directly to considering how to engage your target audience. Now, where is the obvious one? Which social media platform should we focus on? And I bet that you don't want to focus on every single social media platform. You don't have the time. So be specific. And so, for instance, in my own case, I have a profile and I'm fairly active on Twitter. I have a LinkedIn profile, as we see in just a moment. I use ORCID as a repository of my work. And that's pretty much most of what I do. I use WhatsApp for groups, but not to advertise my work. Then what are the objectives and goals of your social media use? So first of all, who do you want to target and why do you want to target them? And what are then your objectives and goals? What is the content that is most suitable for you to share with your target audience? And in what format, text, video, or pictures? Personally, I like a combination of all of those, particularly the pictures and the videos. And then when? Choose the right time to share your posts. Will you do it at 9 o'clock in the morning when everyone is reading their emails, or will you do it mid-afternoon when people have time after lunch? And how often should you post? Should you do it multiple times a day, once a week, once a month? All of these are aspects you should keep in mind in order to build your following. So as part of your strategy, ideally include an editorial calendar and plan how often you should post. You can launch a post, for instance, when you have a project breakthrough, reach a milestone, or get results. Or when your project is featured at a conference or event. When you're presenting your project at a conference or exhibition fair stand. That happens sometimes, of course. When your scientific papers have been peer-reviewed and published. And in that particular case, make sure you add a link. And we'll talk about linking in one of the next few slides. After the event, during the days following your event, monitor your impact and keep tweeting, for instance, relevant content with your own hashtag, or put it on TikTok, or put it on Instagram, or whatever you are planning to use. Of course, you should also post when a new press release is out, or when you appear in the news media. I do that myself, for instance, as well. And you could live tweet during events with interesting pictures, tag or mention people in your tweets, promote the relevant hashtag, and ask participants to join the conversation. So that actually creates a bit of a network around you that might be useful for further promotion. Now, that's all good and well, but social media use is a two-edged sword. It's potentially very helpful to promote your career and your work, but it could also be incredibly time-consuming. So think before you post, get your priorities right. Developing a useful digital footprint is time-consuming, and many scientists struggle to fit this into their already very busy schedules. Your priority should be your work, clearly, right? Because that's what you get assessed on in the end. Everything else should be secondary to that. Therefore, limit your time on social media. Use social media for networking and research promotion, but make sure you do not spend an inordinate amount of time on it, or else it will start affecting your other commitments and lead to a loss of productivity. So don't do social media just for the case of doing social media. Separate your professional and personal profiles if you have different ones. Social media is all over the place, and it's very easy to break barriers between the different areas of your life, but the line between your work and personal life might be blurred, and you may not want that. You may just want to focus one particular profile on your social life and one particular profile on your professional life. It's best to keep them separate, because otherwise it gets very confusing sometimes. And then, of course, refrain from posting about sensitive, confidential, or controversial subjects. Stepping into any type of public forum also requires caution, such as in issues of confidentiality. And particularly if you're a clinician, for instance, working with people, you should be mindful of patient privacy when discussing your work online. So that is just common sense. If you have to get IRB, Institutional Review Board's approval for your work, make sure that when you talk about your work, you maintain that confidentiality and you don't identify people or otherwise. Right, so these are just some considerations before you post your social media. But we do want to share our research as widely as possible once we post, right? So I mentioned already, provide links to your work, to the media, if you are featured in the media, to conference presentations, etc. How can we do that best? Well, you could publish open access so that the whole world has access to your work right away. Also open data sharing. Now, that often comes with a financial commitment because open access publishers require APCs, article processing charges. Of course, there are some that actually allow you to publish free of charge, particularly in countries including Indonesia, where you might get a waiver or a discount on your APC. So do consider that. Provide links to archives or digital repositories if you publish your paper or upload your paper into a repository. In my field, in the physical sciences, we most often use a preprint repository called Archive, ARXIV, it's arxiv.org, which is really started with computing in the 1990s, and then it involves physics, all kinds of physics, including astrophysics, which is my area, engineering, mathematics. So most of the time in my field, but once a paper has been accepted, we upload it onto Archive so that the rest of the world can access it. So provide those links once you've done that. Engage with academic networking platforms and possibly blog about your work or add them to your personal website. So these are just some examples and some suggestions as to how you can to provide access to your work. Now that we know how to do this and why we want to do this, let's talk briefly about popular academic networking platforms. And so if we look at the use of academic and social platforms as of January of this year, you can see that so in the world's population last year had 7.83 billion people. That's a lot of people on this earth. There are now 4.2 billion social media users around the world. So that's more than half of those 7.8. As seen from this figure here that I show on this particular slide, the most popularly used social networking platform, Facebook, that's the top one there, it says 2910 at the end of the bar, was the first social network to surpass 1 billion registered accounts and currently sits at more than 2.9 billion monthly active users. So Facebook is by far the most used social media platform, but it's not necessarily good for research and academic purposes. I am not on Facebook because I don't think it is useful for my own academic work. That is an assessment you have to make for yourself, of course, and it might be different in different fields. But you can see that from the top down, Facebook, YouTube, WhatsApp, Instagram, WeChat, that is the Chinese networking group, TikTok, Facebook Messenger, and then we go down. And a lot of those are actually Chinese. Yeah, and most of them are social media platforms, and very few of those along the left axis are actually academic platforms. One type of repository or one type of ID I would like to single out is ORCID. ORCID is the Open Researcher and Contributor ID. Full disclosure, I used to be a board member for 2 years of ORCID as a researcher member, which was an eye-opener. It allowed me to understand how the publishing world really works. It is a permanent digital ID linked to all of your professional information. It will keep you connected to your body of work, even if you change your name or move institution. The reason I got involved at board level a couple of years ago is that I worked at Peking University in China for 8.5 years. And you may well know that a lot of Chinese people have very similar surnames. And so using ORCID was a good idea to disambiguate surname. So that means distinguish between people with the same surname based on an identifier that is unique to them. So you can distinguish researchers from each other. Once you have completed your ORCID record, and it's free to sign up, it's orcid.org. It's free, and you can decide how much or how little you want to make public to the world. So it's completely up to you, and it's completely in your control as to what is shown to the world. And once you have connected your ORCID to your preferred services, including, for instance, Scopus or Google Scholar, you can automatically push updates to multiple platforms, so that avoids the need to enter the same information in multiple places as you add new publications. And to give you an idea of the use of that, I am based in Australia. We have annual rounds of major grant applications supported by the Australian Research Council. They're actually due in the next month or so. And as part of our application, this is an online portal, we have to upload our research achievements, so our papers, up to 100 papers or something. Now, instead of typing them individually, I just link them to my ORCID. I have more than 100 publications, so I just have to tick 100 publications, and they get automatically uploaded into the application system of the Australian Research Council. So in that context, ORCID is very helpful for me. So I mentioned already a few of these things that are in these bubbles. I mentioned it's easy to distinguish researchers from each other, particularly if you have the same surname. It integrates key research workflows, such as manuscript and grant submission. That was my example of the ARC grants. And it also knits together scholarly collaboration networks and wider industry tools. ORCID is expanding, and a lot of publishers these days have gone on board ORCID and use that as their main ID service, together with the Scopus ID that you may have as well. Right. Now, in addition to ORCID, I would like to briefly talk about Google Scholar. It's a popular search engine for finding scholarly literature. So adding your articles and publications to your Google Scholar profile can help your readers drive your readership of your work. Be sure then, of course, to make your profile public when you create it. So here are some of the key salient points. Google Scholar is one of the most popular online research engines for scholarly literature. Researchers can create their own profiles via Google Scholar citations, and it keeps researchers updated about the new research in their fields and helps monitor citations to published work. If you don't have a Google Scholar account yet, go to scholar.google.com and you can search for someone, and you can see top right of the page here indicated by that arrow. You can create your own profile there and get verified, etc. Last year, my university, because of the pandemic, was running a deficit. We needed to restructure. We actually needed to get rid of 20% of staff at senior levels. So all of the senior academics, associate professor and full professor, had to, in essence, reapply for their jobs, including myself. And one thing that they wanted us to do was link our Google Scholar profile to our record that we use at the university. And so I actually created and set up my profile, and it's easy to do. It doesn't take very much time. You may have heard of two rather often used social media and social networking platforms specific for researchers. And these are academia.edu. Sorry, that is a typo there. That should be academia.edu and ResearchGate. On academia.edu, you can share your research, monitor the impact of your publications, follow other academics, and link your profile to other social media accounts. ResearchGate, you can share your research, join discussion groups, follow other academics, and get a ResearchGate score, which shows how much impact you have really in the field. Both of these are commercial products. I am personally on ResearchGate, but I have decided not to engage with academia.edu because they want too much information from me. And I have to always go and log in and provide more information. And I'm simply not willing to do that, but that is my personal choice. You have to make that choice yourself. Please remember that these sites are not open access repositories. So check your publisher's copyright policies before uploading or sharing articles. because you may not be permitted to share paywalled articles on these platforms. And I'm saying that because a few years ago, one publisher, and I believe that was Elsevier, actually took legal action to get a lot of their papers removed from these networks. So be careful what you put up on there. Here are two other, ResearchGate and academia.edu are often referred to as the Facebook for the scholarly community. Here are two other networks you could consider. They're a bit smaller and a bit younger, including Science Open and My Science Work. They are data sharing and data discovery platforms on which you can promote your work. They also have all of the same social networking features as ResearchGate and academia.edu. So you can see on the left, I've collected some of their properties on Science Open. You can find, share, and collect open access papers, follow other academics, promote your work, monitor the impact, and you can link it to your ORCID profile. And My Science Work is a global scientific platform for researchers to deposit and discover scientific publications and patents in all disciplines. So these are social media networks for academics. We also have reference management tools that do some of the same kinds of things. You may be using some of them already, or at least be familiar with them, and particularly many of you will be aware of Mendeley. Mendeley is a reference manager, but can also be used to connect with fellow researchers, share unpublished data, start and join discussions, and monitor the impact of your work. And there's a couple of others there on that slide that you may have heard of: ReadCube, Find, Read, Manage, and Cite References, Cite You Like, Find, Share, Manage Papers, and Get Article Recommendations, and Zotero. Use it to collect, organize, and cite references, and share and collaborate with your peers. So these are just some sample networks that you could consider engaging with. I would recommend you don't engage with every single one of them. That is going to take too much time, but have a strategy. As I said earlier, be careful where you are promoting your research and where you will most likely reach the stakeholders that you want to reach. Right, so that was academic networking. Let's talk about some social media platforms and how they can be used to advance your research interests and promotion of your research. And we're starting by talking about LinkedIn, which many of you will be familiar with, I think. We actually make our undergraduate students in their final year set up a professional LinkedIn profile as part of a unit, a course that we teach them to be more useful, let's say, to prospective employers. And we mark our students on how good their LinkedIn profiles are as well. We have a marking rubric for that. So LinkedIn is the Facebook of the professional world. It's not just for career opportunities. It is the world's largest professional network with more than 810 million members in more than 200 countries and territories worldwide. In Indonesia, there are more than 70 million users of LinkedIn. So it's well worth engaging with LinkedIn and hopefully find, first of all, your next job there, but also promote your research on LinkedIn. And it can be done in any language you like, including Bahasa. How do you promote your work? Why should you promote your work on LinkedIn? You can use LinkedIn to tell your story, make it powerful and concise, keep it public, highlight your work. You can add images, videos, presentations, and documents, showcase your honors and awards, add your resume and links to ORCID, ResearchGate, Google Scholar, etc. And most importantly, you need to update it regularly. Now, if you like, here's an example of my own LinkedIn page from a few months ago. These are the basics with the type of job that I do. I've added some information about me, and I feature a number of links to presentations where people can see what I look like in real life and how I come across on a screen, right? Not in real life, clearly. So you can add certifications. I've done that here to show that you've reached a certain status in your field and therefore that you are recognized and valued in the field. I've added links to some publications here. These are a few books, but I've also added a link to a page containing all of my research papers. And then here is an example of honors and awards that were added as well, and some of them were actually mentioned in the introduction today. So LinkedIn has all these different headings, and it's well worth spending some time in making your LinkedIn profile as comprehensive as possible so that people can actually search and find you and possibly get in touch with you. I'm a speaker at this webinar, and so in essence, my main job is as a professor at Macquarie University. When I first engaged with Enago, I was contacted through LinkedIn because they found me on LinkedIn, and it's been a very successful relationship for the past decade or so, even longer now. It's been great, and this all started through having a complete LinkedIn profile. Now, Facebook can be used as well. Of course, many of you will be on Facebook. Facebook has an advantage over Twitter, for instance, in the sense that you can add as much text as you like, while Twitter is limited to, I believe, 280 characters. There's no character limit on Facebook. You can add photos, animations, GIFs, videos, links, etc. You can showcase your projects and results in an informal, highly accessible way. You can engage with more than your academic peers. You can engage the general public. That can be useful for science communication if you want to do that. Use the timeline functionality to promote your society or your journal's history if you are involved at a higher level. You can also use hashtags to increase the discoverability of your posts. And finally, you can promote key dates using milestones on Facebook. Facebook is very, very versatile, but it's not just for research, it's for anything and everything in real life. And it's commercial, so they might use your data for things that you may not expect. Here's an example of a Facebook page of a research team based at Charles University in Prague. You can see that you can engage with them using likes or sending messages. You can search something on their page. So these are just some examples. I mentioned briefly, I already mentioned Twitter. Twitter is the largest microblogging platform in the world. There is one, of course, in China. It's called Weixin, but it's only in Chinese, while Twitter is in any language you like. It's possibly the ultimate platform, and about 1/3 of all scholars are now active on it. I am too. You can see my handle up top. I'm Tall Starman. Being a tall guy, I'm almost 2 meters tall, and I'm an astronomer, hence the Tall Starman. It's an easy way to promote your work. You can also keep up to date with advances in your field and other areas of interest. Follow the activities of your colleagues and peers, and be informed of upcoming conferences. Twitter has been gaining popularity in recent years and has a reach much beyond the academic community, including the general public. So you can use it to build your reputation within your research area and strengthen your network. It helps you keep track of emerging trends, generate discussion, get feedback, and help disseminate your research. I use Twitter maybe once every couple of weeks when something new comes up. For instance, if I like something by a colleague, or one of my students has an achievement, or I get featured in the news media, or a new paper comes out, things like that. I use Twitter to promote, in essence, professionally promote what my research group is up to. How can you use Twitter to increase your research visibility? Well, here are some suggestions. You can use images or media for more engagement. You can try to engage with people rather than just broadcasting information. So how you do that? You mention people by using the @ symbol. That means that they get, on their timeline, they get to see that they've been mentioned. And so that way you start that conversation. You can mention your peers, your collaborators, possible funders, the media, etc. But make sure you do it in a way that doesn't become overbearing. So don't spam people. You can follow and retweet key people and organizations in your field. They will see how many followers they have, and who the followers are, and how many people retweet their tweets. And so it is possible that they will follow you back or retweet you. I don't always do it when someone retweets me. I don't always follow them back, but that's a personal preference. You can include hashtags for your intended audience so they can follow it. I'm currently organizing, I'm the chair of the local organizing committee of a large international conference on communicating astronomy with the public, which is meant to be organized in September of this year, physically here in Sydney, but also online, so it's going to be hybrid. And for that particular conference, we have established a hashtag that we use for any type of communication, so that if you search for the conference, you can easily find it back all together. You can also use Twitter Analytics, which we'll talk about in just a moment, to see which tweets are most popular, which are most engaged with, and most visible. Here's an example of promotion on Twitter. If you want to promote your work on Twitter, take the time to compose a thread of tweets that convey your key findings. You want to make sure you're telling a persuasive and cohesive story. And particularly this idea of using a thread is quite helpful. It's often best done directly through the website, twitter.com. You can prepare, I believe, up to 5 Twitter posts with a maximum of about 280 characters. And you can link them to each other and then just submit them all at the same time, so that people on your timeline or followers will see that you've tweeted a set of 5 tweets at the same time. I learned about this a few years ago in the context of science communication here in Australia, and I've used it a few times since, and it's very helpful to make an impact and really show what you've been up to. It's quite helpful. You can maintain a thread of your tweets, focus on the key findings. Obviously, as you can see here, include photos and videos for engagement. Add a link to your publication or your preprint. And when you add links, you can use a URL shortener. So at the top there, the link is the doi.org/ and then those numbers. That is in essence a DOI shortener. Twitter also has its own DOI shorteners. It's t.co/whatever. They automatically shorten long URLs into shorter ones, so that you actually are not penalized in terms of the number of characters that you can use in your tweets. All very helpful. Twitter analysis of over 2 million tweets has shown that tweets with photos and videos gain on average about 30% boost in retweets. Therefore, when composing your thread, try to accompany each tweet with an image or a photo or a link to a URL. Make sure to allocate some space for that link to your publication or preprint. And so you can use those URL shorteners I talked about to save space when adding those links. So here is a graph that shows you the impact or the popularity of different digital media platforms. This is from a Nature survey conducted in 2014 among 3,000 researchers from the science, technology, and medicine and humanities and social sciences fields. And over 95% of those people said they use some form of social media or social network for professional purposes. ResearchGate was the platform with the greatest proportion of professional users. You can see that's the light blue bar all the way on the left there, that's just over, it says 88%. Followed by Google Scholar. Sorry, I should say that again. The bars, light blue is professional and dark blue is overall. So 71% of that overall was professional on ResearchGate. Google Scholar was next, 66%. That's the 4th bar along from the left. Respondents stated that they use scholarly collaboration networks in high numbers. The frequency of use and therefore engagement with the platform was reported to be higher for social media rather than for research media. 50% of professional users said that they access Facebook on a daily basis. I have to admit that I'm part of the other 50% because I don't use Facebook, but that's my personal choice. Use of digital media can be very helpful. And here is an infographic that shows you the impact of one particular paper. And the paper was, the title was called Moving to a World Beyond P less than 0.05, the P factor. It was published in a journal called The American Statistician. And here is, this is an example of an article where social media made a particularly big difference. The article was tweeted by 1,482 accounts. You can see the number on the slide. 1,651 tweets were made with a reach to more than 2.5 million followers combined. It was also picked up by the Times Higher Education and The Conversation, and more than 156,000 people viewed the article. So use of social media to promote your research can make a real difference. All right, now I have a little bit of time left, so let's actually talk about a few other strategies you can use for promotion. And we already mentioned it briefly. We can write or maintain a blog. Consider setting up a blog. It's probably the most time intensive, but also the most versatile way to promote your research. There are many easy to use blogging platforms, including WordPress, Medium, and Tumblr. You may have heard of those. You can use the blog to discuss your research in your own voice and then engage with readers via the blog's comment section. You can offer feedback on publications in your field or give your views on emerging trends. You can discuss lectures, life as an academic, whatever you like, and there are really no limits. So it's the most versatile way to promote your research. You can use it to provide regular updates to highlight your research and keep the audience engaged. You can offer feedback on other published works or share views on emerging trends. You can engage with the audience through the comment section. Ideally, you try to post intriguing and visually appealing content. And so you should design the title or the headline carefully so as to draw in a maximum of readers. That's also referred to as clickbait, by the way, but that's what you should do if you want to attract your readers. I mentioned a few blogging platforms already: WordPress, Warwick Blogs, Tumblr, Blogger, Medium. Most of them offer free domains. Medium is an American online publishing platform which has a hybrid collection of amateur and professional people and publications. Medium is regularly regarded as the best blog host. Blogger.com that's the picture on the right, is also a similar online content management system which enables multi-user blogs with timestamped entries, and it's free. That's, of course, always helpful. Or you can decide to create your website, but then you have to feed traffic to your website. Many leading labs and researchers have their own websites. Websites should provide at least the following information about the researcher: your current research, your educational background, past and current affiliations and positions, individual and group achievements, publications in chronological order, key collaborators, students, postdocs, and other staff members in your group, and funding acquired. You can use Google Sites, you can use WordPress or Yola as free hosts. You can also use things like Reclaim Hosting for a small fee. Some logos on the right there, that's show some providers that you can use. Many of them have free web hosting services. I've got a website myself. This is my own website, and so most of this I use in essence as a bunch of links to sites that I use a lot. But on my homepage, I have the latest news, and in the latest news, you can see I publicize the papers that my group has been publishing, or the public outreach event that I do, etc. So you can use your website for anything, but of course you need to draw in traffic to your website, which is not always that easy. I want to say a few words about the use of keywords. Ensure that you use effective keywords in the title and abstract of your article, and also in your promotional posts, whether it's a press release, a conference proceeding, a social media post, or whatever it is. Keywords are used by journals, search engines, and databases to classify articles, and without them, most articles would likely not be found by interested readers. Once the reader has been guided towards your article based on those keywords, it entices the reader to engage with the full article. So keywords can help peers in your field search for a paper using a range of abstracting and indexing services. I remember when I first started as a PhD student in the mid-1990s, I had to go to the library of my institution and look up abstracts by keywords in rows and rows of abstract books, which were physical books that published abstracts on papers in the literature based on keywords. That's no longer necessary, of course, but keywords are still helpful. Ideally, use established, subject-specific, and index-standardized terms as keywords. In my field of astrophysics, we have the Unified Astronomy Thesaurus, which many of our journals use, so we use a standardized set of keywords. Use the same keywords and phrases in the title and regularly, although not overbearingly so, in the abstract. Search engine optimization, SEO, is important in ensuring that a work appears as high as possible in the search results. And that is particularly the case if you use search engines like Google. Now, some researchers consider using YouTube, and you might want to do the same. That's entirely up to you, of course. You can prepare a short animated video based on your research study and post it to YouTube, which will improve the visibility of your research, of course. Make sure you use the right keywords so people find it. You can post in video logs regarding a research study or related topics, which can also create interest among viewers. And in all cases, you can add links to your lab's research papers or to the lab's website in the description of the video. Now, here's an example, a very popular YouTube channel. It's called Minute Physics, and has very simple explanations of basic physics. And just for a little bit of light entertainment, I thought, let's have a look at that video, Why is the Solar System Flat? And instead of just showing you a screen grab on the top left, I've actually downloaded a video. I'm going to share it with you. It's about 3 minutes. And after that, we'll wrap up.
Our sun and the Earth and all the planets and moons and dwarf planets and asteroids and comets, the solar system in short, formed about 4.6 billion years ago from a nebulous cloud of swirling gas and dust, which coalesced thanks to the irresistibly attractive force of gravity. However, this nebula started off more or less as a big shapeless blob. So how did our solar system end up with all the planets and their moons orbiting in a flat disk? I mean, we've all seen the planetary model of the atom, which is definitely wrong when applied to atoms, but it also kind of suggests that planets might revolve around the sun every which way. So is our solar system somehow special in its flatness? Or is the planetary model of the atom doubly wrong? Well, our solar system definitely isn't alone. Many exoplanet star systems are flat, a lot of galaxies are flat, black hole accretion disks are flat, Saturn's rings are flat, etc. So why, when there's all of 3D space to fill, does the universe have this preference for flatness? The answer has to do with two things: collisions and the fact that we live in 3 dimensions. Bear with me. Anytime a bunch of objects held together by gravity are zooming and circling around, their individual paths are nearly impossible to predict, and yet collected together they have a single total amount that they spin about their center of mass. It may be hard to figure out exactly what direction that rotation is in, but the mathematics implies there must be some plane in which the cloud, taken as a whole, spins.
Okay, I'm going to stop it there because that I wanted to show you that just to give you a feeling for how a popular YouTube video based on research by these researchers could be used to engage a broader audience. Right, so moving on, I would like to share some more tips for research promotion. So here is a set of those tips. Choose the right journal, write a review article in your field, make a video or a graphical abstract for your article. So that's in essence what that YouTube video referred to. Use animated figures in your article, record an engaging podcast, make sure that your contact information, make sure that your contact information and affiliation are correct so people can actually get in touch with you. Share a link to your published paper with your peers. Even if you don't, if you've signed over the copyright of your work to traditional publishers, they will often send you a link these days where you can access your paper free of charge. You can send that to close colleagues and peers who will be interested in your work. So do so, because that promotes your work. You could give your papers to students as reading or reference material. And make sure that you keep your research profile updated on all platforms with which you engage. And that is another reason why I recommend that you engage with a relatively small number rather than with all of them, right? And finally, you could try to publish in special issues of journals that attract a bit more attention from your peers, but be careful that you do so only in well-established and well-regarded journals, because a lot of what we call predatory journals also try to entice researchers to publish in special issues that will possibly not be peer-reviewed, at least not properly, and that may actually be to the detriment of your career if you publish in those predatory journals. The final section here today of the webinar is on measuring your impact. We've got a few more slides to go through. One of the perhaps most useful ways to track your own online profile is using tools like Impact Story, Altmetric, or Plum Analytics. So there are several tools available to track your impact and the progress of your research profile. Regularly monitoring the metrics available via each of those communication channels can be useful in determining how effective the tools are. While each of the academic social networks allow you to track platform-specific metrics, it's useful to use a tool that allows you to monitor and track your performance on a broader scale across multiple networks and channels. And so those broader channels, broader tools are Impact Story, Altmetric, and Plum Analytics. Impact Story allows researchers to discover metrics for their work from scholarly and popular social media. It allows them to import papers, data sets, software, slide decks, and other scholarly products into a single profile. And also third-party services such as Figshare, which is often used for presentations, ORCID, which we talked about already, etc., can be connected to the account to get automatic updates and import new research. Researchers can also highlight their key achievements on their profile page, and they can get an idea of who is benchmarking, recommending, saving, and citing their work using the metrics. Here is an example of a profile of an author on Impact Story. Each author's profile page includes an overview of his or her achievements, covering Wikipedia mentions, percentage of content available as open access, and something called Hot Streak, which provides insight into the conversation around your research. So each of your achievements is benchmarked against the activity of other authors within the network to provide an idea of where your activity sits within the community. The timeline on the right summarizes the number of online mentions or likes your work has received over the past year, broken down by network such as Twitter, LinkedIn, etc. So that's an example of Impact Story. Here is a snapshot of a genomics researcher named Holly Bick. On the main profile page, the links in the left-hand navigation bar correspond with the scholarly genre you want to explore. The blue or green badges can be used to see the underlying data that document scholarly and public impacts of a researcher's work. And you can click on any title of a work that would lead to an in-depth description of the article, including full citations, an abstract and summary of metrics. So it's a very powerful tool. An alternative one is called Altmetric. And I've got some experience with that myself, quite positive actually. It's an indicator of the attention received by an article. Not necessarily by peers, but by anyone. And not necessarily, it doesn't say that your article is correct, it just said people talk about it. Researchers receive alerts each time their work is mentioned, or not, you can receive them, you don't necessarily always receive them. Altmetric helps researchers benchmark their activities against others in the field. Altmetric data can be included in progress reports or to endorse profiles. Researchers can monitor online activity and discussions in real time. And Altmetric gathers data from social media sources, blogs, mainstream media, reference tools, etc. Now, we had a big paper out a few years ago, published in a journal called Nature Astronomy. And at the end of, this was in 2019, at the end of the year, at the end of 2019, our paper had made it into the top 100 Altmetric papers. Altmetric tracks 2.7 million research outputs, and we were number 60 out of 2.7 million. So that was quite a big thing, and we were very happy about that, of course. So we made it into the top 100. And you can see that multicolored circle in the top left with the number 2829 in it, that's the score, and that's a really high score. That's why we got so high up in that ranking. that was really cool, to be honest. I was quite proud of that. Then finally, Plum Analytics accumulates research metrics for all types of scholarly research output, and they're categorized into 5 groups. You can see them there: usage, social media, captures, citations, and mentions. In view of the time, I'm going to recommend that if you're interested in these, have a look at Plum Analytics to understand how they work. Plum Analytics targets 67 types of output, including books, book chapters, posters, and all kinds of output. It tracks multiple versions of the same article, published, preprint, green open access, etc. It categorizes metrics for clear understanding and analysis, and it offers more sources of metrics than any other altmetrics provider. So it might be useful. Personally, I have not used it. I've used Altmetric, which I find quite powerful, but Impact Story, Altmetric, and Plum Analytics are all very useful. And here's an example of what the Plum Analytics dashboard looks like. It allows you to see what is going on with your research via a single interface. The screenshot here is an example of an institution's Plum dashboard. It shows usage, captures, mentions, social media, and citation metrics for an article called Synopsis of the Plants Known as Medicinal and Poisonous in Northeast of Brazil. Allows you to drill down into the total counts to learn more about what people are saying about your research. And at the bottom is an article summary, includes bibliographic information, but also highlights the most recent tweets about the article. By clicking on the Tweets tab at the top there, you can view the total number of tweets and retweets and see a full listing. Also, by clicking on the Wikipedia mentions, you can view the total number of Wikipedia mentions and extracts of full entries. So Plum Analytics is now part of Elsevier, and so very often you can access it through Elsevier directly. That gets me to my summary, and really what I would like to share with you, we've got a 3-step promotion strategy. We start by disseminating, discussing our research so that we can collaborate more with people. We can present our research at conferences, and certainly we have to create an ORCID to make an impact. We then can disseminate the research, for instance, by writing blogs, the use of academic or social networks, sharing data, creating a website, writing review articles, and the like. And then finally, we track our progress and measure the success using both traditional and alternative metrics. That's what I talked about in the last almost 1 hour. I hope this was helpful, at least to most of you. I am more than happy to answer your questions, and we can do that using the Q&A, the chat, or even raise your hand, and I'm happy to answer your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. And so let's start the discussion.
All right, thank you very much, Professor Richard. That was really very informative with all the recent platforms and everything, which I think would be very useful for the audience. So thank you so much for sharing that. So similar like what Nicole has posted in the chat box, we welcome all participants who have any questions to post your question in the Q&A box. Feel free if you want to type in the question in Bahasa or in English. And while waiting for questions, Professor Richard, I actually have a few questions in mind. So yeah, so the first one would be, I noticed that from your presentation, it seems that this trending method has been quite commonly used by faculty members in various universities. So my question would be, how do you think would be the best way to engage all generations of faculty members to apply these trending methods? Because I understand that it could be very time consuming, it could be very tech savvy, so it could be overwhelming maybe for some. So what would you think would be the like a good tip or suggestions to make this more engaging? I mean, use of maybe not so much social media, at least the academic network platform for faculty members of all like various ages or generations, if you will. So maybe if you can comment on that, Professor Richard.
Thank you. That's a good question. There's a couple of things I can suggest. First of all, make sure that everyone signs up for an ORCID record. it's a one-time time investment. It doesn't take very long to set that up because your data is imported automatically. You probably already have a Scopus ID. So by linking that to your ORCID ID, you can populate your ORCID profile quite quickly. And it doesn't take much time at all to then monitor it. You don't actually have to monitor it because it's quite good at doing it on its own. So having that as a starting point is very good. Some communities are active on ResearchGate where they talk to each other. I would say that would be a second priority. The first priority would be ORCID, possibly secondly ResearchGate. Now, I understand that, of course, younger people are more adept at navigating social media and also academic social media networks because they're just more used to it, and then possibly some older academics. But the older academics tend to be more senior, and they often have research groups. And so it might well be that if the older academics want to promote their research from the research group more, they could assign this task, the social media task, to a junior group member who is probably more versatile and more up to date with the social media networks. So that way it's a win-win for everyone.
All right. So yeah, so I guess the take-home message for that would be at least start with ORCID ID, right, Professor Richard? So at least start with ORCID ID. Yeah, and then before moving on to a more time-consuming or more like engaged platform like ResearchGate. But I agree with your suggestion. Actually, ResearchGate is quite easy to navigate, so it should be like a quite easy networking platform to use. So yeah, so thank you so much for answering that. And I see that we already have a question in the Q&A box. So should I just read the question, or you would want? All right, okay. So hello, Professor Richard. Thank you for sharing your insightful presentation. So this question is from Tia. I wonder, what do you think about the focus on one to two social media accounts that have good engagement rate? Or would you think expanding the channel with maybe social media accounts, but with a rather low engagement rate? Which do you think is a better strategy? So I guess that would be the question.
Thanks, Tia. Well, look, anything you do is going to take time, and time is, of course, a limited commodity. So I would say, if you do it and you want to do it well, limit yourself to a relatively small number of social media networks. Now, so personally, I can only speak from my personal experience, clearly. And so, yes, that setting up ORCID is easy. You don't even have to look at it. So that's a one-time thing. Maybe once a year, once every 2 years, you look at it. So that's easy. ResearchGate, same thing. You don't have to do much to it. But if you want to engage more, I find Twitter very useful. Short messages. When something happens in your research group, I give a public lecture. I mentioned in the media. One of my team members publishes a paper. We get a grant, things like that. That goes on Twitter, and that engages a wider audience. And that takes a bit more effort, of course, because you have to collect your followers and maybe follow back and all that. So it's a bit more work. I am also, as you saw earlier from the presentation, on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is, in essence, a CV. So you put things on there that you put in your CV as well. So that takes a bit more time to get organized, and you keep adding to it when something new comes up. So that's just like Twitter. You do something when something new comes up. Less frequently so, I think, than Twitter. Of course, if you want to write a blog and you want to post it somewhere, you can post it on LinkedIn. So that could also be a time sink, right? Personally, I don't use Facebook. I don't use Instagram. Oh, I forgot to talk about Instagram today. For some reason, I skipped that slide. Apologies. So I decided myself to keep it focused on Twitter, LinkedIn, ResearchGate, and ORCID mostly.
Okay, so I guess would be focusing to few rather than try to use too many accounts, and yeah, especially if we don't really get that much of high rate of engagement, right? So yeah, so thank you so much for that answer. I hope that answers your question, Tia. If you still have further questions, feel free to comment or type more questions in the Q&A box. So we still welcome everybody. If you have any more questions, feel free to type in the Q&A box. While I actually have another question for you, Professor Richard. And So I guess I think you did not really mention about Publon's as well, Publon's account, which is quite, I think it's quite popular these days. Like, I mean, for instance, in Indonesia, I think like in the Sinta account, which is like a national database for researchers, I think other than putting ORCID ID, I think researchers are also encouraged to put a Publon's account ID. So, so yeah, you didn't really touch on that part. I don't know if that's by accident or is it not really within your area because it's maybe more to, I don't know, maybe life science or something. I don't know. So if you do you have any comment on Publons and how the use of that? Yeah.
Thanks. Yes, that's a good point. As far as I'm aware, Publons is a good platform to discuss papers that were published in whatever area. Right. So in essence, it's a discussion platform of papers. And I'm familiar. I'm not on Publons. I'm familiar with Publons in the context of problematic papers. I follow a daily blog called retractionwatch.com that talks about papers that
retracted papers,
research misconduct, etc. And very often, some of those blog posts say, well, comments were left at the bottom of papers on Publons, and that led to misconduct investigation at so-and-so university, which eventually led to the paper being retracted or the researcher getting fined or whatever. So in that context, I am familiar with Publons, but it's mostly a platform to discuss papers rather than engage more widely.
I see. Okay. Thank you for confirming that. Okay, so that makes sense. Yeah, so I guess it's also a rather, what should I say, easily maintained as well, like ORCID maybe, right? Having that, rather than like, inputting.
In terms of Publons, you can, it's like most of these networks, you can go and see what's on your timeline or what's in your area of interest and decide to engage as much or as little as you have the time for.
So it's more like a discussion forum, as you said. So it's really good for that purpose. Okay. All right. So I think we probably still have time for like 1 or 2 questions, right? And I still welcome everybody. If there's anybody who would like to maybe ask their question directly by raising their hands, I think that's also welcome, right, Nicole?
Yes.
Rather than Q&A, if any of the audiences here would like to comment or ask questions to Professor Richard. I think it was a really insightful presentation. So so I'm pretty sure there should be a lot of questions, I would think. So while waiting for that, so I can also see that it could be really overwhelming for people who are not really into social media to feel like they're pressured into using social media platforms as it is a trending strategy or trending method to endorse their publications. So would it be a better strategy for like an institution to have a social media manager to actually do this instead of relying on each and every faculty member to do it themselves? Or do you have any experience with that? Or do you think it's, what do you think of that, Professor Richard?
Well, yes and no. I think the managers of individual research groups, the senior faculty, and also perhaps the members of research groups may want to actively promote their own work. Well, at an institutional level, you can do less, right? Because you have a whole institution and you have to be a bit more picky in terms of what you prioritize.
True.
And so at we've just undergone a restructuring. Until last year, we were in the Department of Physics and Astronomy, and we had an engagement coordinator. That's now gone up to a higher level and departments have merged, but anyway, we had an engagement coordinator who managed our departmental Twitter feed, Facebook, Instagram, because the idea was to engage with potential students and recruit them, and that's why we use Instagram because young people tend to use Instagram these days. So that was a position, was part of someone else's position. It was just a part of a role to maintain those social media accounts. They can only do things at the institutional level. So that means it's kind of broad sweep, while individual people individual members of research groups can promote their work in a more fine-grained manner. So I think it's complementary.
I see. Okay, thank you for sharing that. Yeah, because I was just thinking that would be probably an easier way out if the institution tend to not, are able to make more faculty members engaged, and because we understand that maybe it's somewhat more like a preferred method, if you will, I think, right? Like using this trending method of using social media platforms, so it's kind of like whether you like it or not, the trend is heading that way, kind of. So yeah, I was just thinking, but thank you for sharing that, the plus and minus of actually having a social media manager. And so I think we're almost wrapping up, but there is one question, right, in the Q&A box. It's from Ibu Ruth Novalia. And her question is, hello, Professor Richard. Thanks for the great presentation. I want to ask a question. What are the advantages or differences of publishing in international conferences versus publishing in journals? So I think it's like proceedings in conferences versus journals. So yeah, if you want to answer that. Yeah.
I'm very happy to answer that question, although it's not on social media. It's not about social media. That's okay. So I think in terms of where you want to disseminate your information, the first question you have to ask yourself is, what is my audience? Right? If my audience is local politicians, don't go to an international conference. Publish in a local journal. Publish in a policy brief. But if your audience are peers, academics, anywhere else in the world, in your field, more widely, yeah, publish in international journals and go to international conferences. The only caveat here, the difficulty here, in the context of Indonesia, is I know that you get assessed on how many articles you publish in Scopus indexed journals, for instance, and these are usually international, right? So there is pressure, the publish or perish pressure to publish in those international journals. Although, depending on your audience, you may not actually need to publish there to reach your audience, or it may actually be a bad choice. So you do have to meet your obligations, from your employer and from the country, I suppose, to publish sufficient numbers of papers in those Scopus index journals. But really, if you want to reach your target audience, that's what you need to think first before thinking about domestic or international.
Okay. So Ibu Ruth Novalia, I hope that answered your question. If you still have any further comments or follow-up questions, feel free to type in. Boleh dituliskan di chat box kembali atau di comment box. Silahkan Ibu Ruth, apakah sudah memadai jawabannya? Is that clear enough? So I guess the short answer would be I guess it would, again, depending on the audience, but the standard practice would go for a Scopus Index journal or highly reputable international journals, right, Professor Richard? Yeah. So thank you so much for answering that. So I think we're almost heading to the end of the session, but I would like to ask the final question. I think Professor Richard, it might not be a too serious of a question, but my question would be, how do you think a person can get more engaged in academic or social media platforms if they are not a social person? That would be like the final question, because I can understand it could be very overwhelming, because I think even like getting to try to tap on this topic, it could be quite challenging. I mean, in Indonesian, people are very social, so they're very active on social media, but I don't think they utilize it commonly. I mean, maybe I haven't really dive into it, but I don't really see a lot of people using it for particularly like academic purposes. So I think, but there's a huge potential there. So so my final question would be, how would a non-social person try to engage in the social media platforms or academic network platforms? That would be my final question before I give it back to Nicole for closing. Yeah.
Yes. Well, look, if you're not a social person, or if you feel awkward in social situations, actually social media is for you, because it's not instant, right? In social situations,
very good answer.
You post something and it might take a while before you get feedback. Plus, no one sees you, right? They just see your posts. So I think it's actually a non-threatening way of getting your work out. So I do encourage everyone, even if they feel they're not very versatile in social situations. Post your work on social media, you might get more positive feedback than you expect.
That's a really good answer, actually. Yeah, so I didn't think of it that way. So thank you so much, Professor Richard, for sharing that. So yeah, I encourage everyone here who attend this talk, and maybe those who will see this recording later on in IPB's, in DPIS YouTube channel, to try to be more active in using the social media and academic networking platform for endorsing publications. So yeah, I think this has been a really insightful presentation you give, Professor Richard. I thank you so much for that. And I would pass this back on to Nicole for the closing by Ibu Eva, I think. So thank you so much again, Professor Richard, for your insightful presentation.
Thank you, Dr. Richard. Thank you, Dr. Fritria, for excellent questions, and thank you, audience, for attending. So I'll give the mic to floor or the screen to Dr. Eva in order to, do the closing remarks.
Thank you, Ms. Nicole. Thank you, Professor Richard, from the sharing. It's very inspiring and motivating, actually. Yeah, as what Ibu Fitria told before, that I also I'm very passive in the social media, and I think we need to build strong motivations in order to be very active. I mean, need some kind of familiarizations, and that's the reason why we conducted this event, in order to give some kind of idea and also motivations to all of the lecturers and students in our in IPB University. And because it is very obvious that the importance of the publications is increasing, and also that the impact of the publications is one of the indicators which is very important as well. And citations citation is the most indicators in order to see how impactful our publications. And this is not such kind of a tradition, so we need to build this tradition, actually. And of course, it's not easy, and I think the way how we communicate our publications in social media, where we used to, many people used to publish their daily life activity in the social media instead of publications. Of course, it is the way of communicating is completely different, and this needs some kind of practice or familiarizations, and more basic, more importantly, is our strong motivations. Why we should do this? Does it only for citations, or probably we need to put more foundational, substantial motivations in order to inspiring people with our writings, in order to provide solutions and stuff which is more of course beneficial for publics. And I think such kind of motivation we need to build, and then to make us more aware about how important, whether it is very important to communicate, and we can use this free platform, social media, instead of not instead of, because it can be kind of complementary of open access, very high, very expensive open access journal which we have to pay. Then we can use such kind of free platform to increase, to boost our citations, to boost our impact, and to give more benefits to the public. Yeah, I think that's some remarks from me, and I indeed encourage our community in IPB University. Let's start build these traditions, so that we can give more benefits. And of course, for the IPB itself, we really need to boost our citations in order to increase our performance as well. And I think this has kind of cycles, and this will be very beneficial for all of the stakeholders or elements. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Eva, for your closing remarks, and take care, everybody, and stay healthy. Terima kasih. Thank you, Dr. Richard. Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye. Take care.
Thank you, Nicole. Thank you, Professor Richard. Thank you, everyone. Whoever, thank you.
Thank you, everyone.